All right, Ampituashte. Good day, everyone. My name is Leya Charles. As Hannah mentioned, I am the Water Assessment and Impaired Waters List Coordinator for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. If you are here today to talk about the draft Impaired Waters List, you are in the right place. Welcome to one of 5 public meetings that we're having about the draft list this season. And, you know, because Minnesota does have a diverse ecosystems in our borders of Minnesota, we are having regional meetings. So this one is about the central regional meeting. So the Mississippi River Twin Cities and the Minnesota River Yellow Medicine watersheds. And then we also have some special meetings for pollutants such as PFAS and sulfate that will be happening, and you'll hear more about those at the very end. Next slide. So the Clean Water Act requires states and tribal nations with treatment as a state to develop standards to protect our designated uses. Our designated uses being the goals of what we desire our water bodies to meet. And the Act also requires that states will list waters that don't meet those standards. So that's not at all what the Clean Water, it's not the entire comprehensive of what the Clean Water Act requires. The Clean Water Act requires states to do a variety of things to protect and restore our waters, but this is one piece of it, is this standards to protect designated uses and the list of waters that don't meet those standards. The Clean Water Act was established in 1972, and fun fact, MPCA was established 5 years before that, which to me shows that Minnesotans really care about the vast number of waterways in our state and care about protecting them. Next slide. So Minnesota calls this list that we submit to the federal government, to the Environmental Protection Agency, as a requirement of the Clean Water Act. We call it our Impaired Waters List, right? So the Impaired Waters List is cumulative. It tracks, you know, every water that's been shown to not meet one or more of its standards from year to year. We submit this list to the EPA every 2 years. So it is pretty frequent to show an updated information about our water bodies in Minnesota. And it is cumulative, and a water body can be impaired for more than one use, right? And we'll talk about those uses in a moment here. So currently in our draft list, we have, you know, over 6,000 impairments over almost 3,000 water bodies. Next slide. Yeah, there we go. So what is a designated use? You know, a designated use, you might also hear it called a beneficial use. These are the uses or goals that we want to meet in our water bodies. And there's different water quality standards for each of these uses, because the things that keep fish and bugs healthy in our water bodies might not be the same requirements to keep humans healthy in our water bodies, right? And so when I am referring to us comparing against water quality standards, those are compared against any of the standards that a use is applied to that water body. So a water body, a lake, a stream, a wetland, because we're talking about surface waters here, might have more than one use, right? We want to keep it healthy for our aquatic life, for our fish and for our bugs, as well as we want to be able to swim in it. So it would have both. It would have both of those uses. And that's what we're going to be focusing on in our watershed assessments today, is we are comparing against the standards for swimming, you know, boating, aquatic recreation, as well as aquatic life. So our healthy fish community and our healthy macroinvertebrate or bug community. Next slide. We also have uses to protect human health, for aquatic consumption and for wild rice production. And these two designated uses, we're not going to be focusing a lot on here today. These will be focused on in those statewide meetings. So tune into one of those on Friday and next Tuesday if you're interested in learning more about these. But we're going to focus on aquatic recreation and aquatic life. Next. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the assessments that we do. How do we monitor and, analyze all of that data to feed into the impaired waters list? So starting in 2010, with the establishment of the Clean Water Fund, Minnesota established our watershed monitoring approach. So when you're looking at this map here, you're seeing all of the 80 watersheds within Minnesota. And we go through a rotational cycle. So within a 10-year time frame, we will have gone through and assessed every single watershed in Minnesota. And we've done that once already. So now we're already partway through going and assessing these watersheds for a second time. And so in this cycle of the impaired waters list for these last 2 years, since the 2022 impaired waters list, we've assessed 8 watersheds again. So we've assessed these once before, and this is the second time we're going back and looking at them again. And those are the ones that you see highlighted in red there. And the 2 we're going to focus on here today in the central region is the Mississippi River Twin Cities and the Minnesota River Yellow Medicine. So in these last 2 years, we have assessed over 2,000 different water bodies across each of these watersheds. And the second approach that we take is for toxic pollutants. So for those pollutants like mercury or PFAS that affect human health that accumulate in fish tissue. And we do a broad sweep across the entire state every 2 years for those. So we're not waiting, 10 years until we go back to that watershed again in order to find any of that information. So it's also important to note that Minnesota monitors more often than any of the states around us, and we have a pretty extensive monitoring and assessment plan because of this. Next slide. All right, so let's start diving into a little bit some of the assessments that we've done in these 2 watersheds, right? So you can see here again, I have listed out according to the designated use. What are the pollutants that we are seeing that affect that use? That's how we have our water quality standards set up. So you'll see, as we are going back through and assessing these watersheds again for the second time, there's a lot less impairments than we saw the first time around. And a lot of that is encouraging. It's just as important to keep waters off the impaired waters list as it is in that cumulative list to eventually gather enough data to take it off the list and to show that it's improved, that it's not impaired anymore. So here's listed out the numbers of some of these new impairments that we have, that we are seeing in the Twin Cities and in the Yellow Medicine. We're seeing some more bacteria nutrient impairments. We're seeing some more fish and bug impairments. And the fish impairments, we have a lot more monitoring sites on fish in collaboration with Minnesota DNR than we did the first go around. So we have more data to be able to assess those. So that's why you're seeing some of those numbers. Next. Okay. So this map, like I mentioned, the impaired waters list is cumulative, right? So this is showing all of the waters in these color codes from the start of our impaired waters list to now. This also includes these waters listed in this draft list. So you'll see red, any of those water bodies that are impaired. In purple are the delistings. And in green are the water bodies that we have assessed and found to be meeting all of their water quality standards. Now it's important also let's reframe and remember those designated uses. Because a water body is impaired for one use doesn't mean that it's not applicable to be used for another use. For example, aquatic consumption. You might have an impairment for mercury in fish, but that doesn't mean that it's not safe to swim in or that it's not safe for the diversity and the species. We've seen a lot of species of fish and bugs. So it's important to remember when you're looking at impairments in your watershed and you're wondering, you know, is my lake healthy to swim in or not? To think about the use of what you are using that water body for. And not just, you know, looking at if it's red or if it's green. So in the Mississippi River, Twin Cities watershed, we do have 47 new impairments this year. We have an ammonia impairment, 4 bugs, 22 for fish, that being fish species, not fish consumption. 3 for dissolved oxygen, 4 for total suspended solids or sediment, the cloudiness in the water, and 12 for chloride. And we can talk more about those if folks have specific questions at the end. Next slide. So then let's sit here on the Minnesota River yellow medicine. So again, to reframe this, that this is the cumulative list. So these are all of the impairments we've seen from last time and then also from this time, as well as any delistings from last time to this time. And so in the yellow medicine, we have 25 new impairments over 18 different water bodies. 20 of those are for aquatic life. So we've got 9 for bug biodiversity, 10 for fish biodiversity, 1 for dissolved oxygen, and 4 for different listings of bacteria and streams. Next slide. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about what are these new impairments that we've got on these watersheds, okay? So we are seeing some new impairments that are going on the list. We also are seeing some coming off the list. And so we'll go back through those watershed maps and check out what are some of these that are coming off the list. We are removing 27 impairments total this list, and a good chunk of them are here for aquatic recreation in the Twin Cities. In order to, delist a nutrient, we do have all of those parameters outlined in our assessment guidance manual. You need at least 8 samples over 2 years. You need to be able to show that there is a good improvement in this water body in order to take it off the list. Next slide. So here we have our Mississippi River Twin Cities watershed again, and you can pop in and see all those little arrows because it's hard to see those purple dots there of the different water bodies that are being delisted for nutrients. So we have 13 different lakes that have had an extensive amount of restoration work done on them that are being delisted for nutrients. Next slide. And then in our yellow medicine watershed, we have one that is being delisted for chlorpyrifos, Chautauqua Creek. So where do we go from here? So the impaired waters list is that federal requirement, like I mentioned, and a piece of that is that we are required as an agency to then, once something is on the impaired waters list, develop a total maximum daily load, which is a fancy way of saying, the pollution budget for that water body, for that lake or that stream segment or that wetland. And that tells us how much pollution should be allowed to enter that water body and still meet those uses for aquatic life, for aquatic recreation, etc. So that's what's next up, is if it is listed on the impaired waters list, there's a requirement to develop a total maximum daily load. And then after that, as we're going through all of these watersheds throughout the states, there will be some updates to our RAPS reports that have been completed. Every watershed, all 80 watersheds in Minnesota, have a watershed restoration and protection strategy developed. And I plopped this map here because a lot of these next steps our project managers know a lot more about. So Mike Weckworth is our project manager in the Minnesota River Yellow Medicine. And then in the Twin Cities, we've got a lot of water bodies that we have several folks that help manage. So if you are never sure who to talk to, you can always send it to me and I'll get you the right person. Next up. So our impaired waters list is in the public comment phase right now, right? That's why you're here listening to this meeting. So our public comment is open until January 12th. After that, we will be reviewing all of the comments that were submitted, responding to comments, and making any alterations as appropriate to new data submitted to our impaired waters list. And then we'll be submitting the final list to the EPA by April 1st. They then have 30 days to approve it or disapprove it, and that's when it will become final and replace our 2022 impaired waters list. It's kind of the timeline there for you. So right now we are looking at receiving comments on our list, that extensive, beautiful spreadsheet that you can find on our website here. One of the tabs on the spreadsheet is the statewide mercury TMDL. And then the second document is that PDF document of our assessment guidance manual. And that manual has been reformatted, so hopefully it is much easier to find the answers you are looking for. There is a new appendix in it listing out the waters used for production of wild rice. So that is a list of all the waters that we've assigned the beneficial use of producing wild rice. And that is new this year. New also this year, we have a new tool that is way easier to comment on the draft list. So all you need to do is go to the website and click comment now, and that'll pop open a new browser. You can then type in your comment straight to that text box that's there once you put in your information, and you can link a letter, you can link the GPS points of a water body you're talking about, you can link more data, photos, supplementary documents. Next slide. And then once you click submit, wanted to point out to you that you can go down and click view comments if you have anxiety like me and you want to confirm that it was submitted. That's how you can find out. Next slide. All right, so I mentioned some of those parameters will be talked about later in more detail in the statewide meetings. So that's Friday, December 8 and Tuesday, December 12. And then if you want to tune in to any of those other regional meetings, those are all those dates and times there, which you can also find on our website. This is one of 5. And also to note, both of those statewide meetings have the same content. So you don't need to go to both, just pick one. All right, so leaving you with a couple of takeaways, and then we can get into questions here afterwards. Minnesota does monitor more often in more locations than any other states. So we are so passionate about our water and are out looking for what's going on. And we're very transparent in then listing that in the impaired waters list. So when you are seeing a really bulky, big impaired waters list compared to other states around us, that doesn't necessarily mean that Minnesota's water is worse off, but it means we have a lot more data. Also positively, we are seeing some improvements on nutrients in lakes, specifically in the Twin Cities area, because of all that extra data that we have, which is great. And it's also really important to note that it takes time for restoration to occur and to take something off the list. So you can be seeing continuing improvements in your lake in your stream, in a wetland. And perhaps we just don't have enough data quite yet to say, yes, we are confident that that is going to come off the list. So it takes time. All right. So that is just a very, very brief and broad overview of all of the assessments that feed into the impaired waters list and a little bit about what's new this year in the impaired waters list for these 2 watersheds. And I'll leave you here with a picture of Coleman Lake. This is one of our success stories that's been written about on our website that I encourage you to go and read some more about. A lot of restoration work was put into Coleman Lake through watershed partners, through local efforts. And it is one of those delisted nutrient lakes in the Twin Cities. So that little bit.ly link, that QR code there you can scan will take you straight to the spot to comment, public comments. And there's an email right there. If there's any questions that don't get answered today, you can find both of those pieces of information on our Impaired Waters List website as well. So we can go ahead and get into any questions.
Yeah, and I just want to hop back on here quick. Apologies at the beginning, I noted there would be a chat feature. Something happened on the back end of our settings with just some logistics mix-ups. So for this one, we're just going to use the raise hand feature. And if you could just speak your comment out loud, we'll be able to respond to you there. Yeah, apologies, we don't have the chat feature enabled. I was trying to get it set up on the back end here, but we will definitely have it for the statewide meeting. So yeah, so if you have a question, just go ahead, raise your hand. And Leya, if you want to just move through and call on people now that we don't need to moderate a chat box, you can just run through them.
Sure. Looks like first up that I saw was Carly Griffith.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
I can, yep.
This is Carly. I'm with the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. I saw that one of the impairments that was added to Pool 2 of the Mississippi was PFOS for fish tissue. And I know that there were 5 additional PFAS compounds with site-specific water quality criteria developed and released in January of 2023. Was Pool 2 of the Mississippi also assessed for impairments for those 5 most recent water quality criteria for Pool 2?
Yeah, good question. So the statewide assessments we did this year are all for PFAS in fish tissue, not the site-specific standards of PFAS in the water column. So if there was any data taken from fish in Pool 2, we did assess that. But that is not newly listed for PFAS this year in fish tissue. There are some previous impairments, it looks like in Pool 2 for PFAS in fish tissue and water column, but those are not new this year.
Okay, and quick follow-up, when will the impairments for the water column compounds happen next? Is that in 2 years' time?
Yeah, so that'll be during our Great River assessment when we're going through and doing the entirety of the Mississippi River, and that'll be in 2026.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then I have Joe McCauley.
Mulcahy. Will you be emailing Zoom links for the statewide meetings?
No, so the Zoom links for the statewide meetings are on the Impaired Waters List website. And so you just have to go on there and click that link, and that's how you get to it.
The Impaired Waters website on PCA's website?
Correct, yeah.
So you don't have a link for that?
Hey, I can just hop in here quick too, doing the communications on the back end. Joe, if you could shoot an email to, do you see that email on the screen, impaired.waters.mpca? If you want to send an email right there, normally we would just give you the link in the chat. But again, I'm so sorry, our chat feature isn't working right now. So just send an email and we will reply to you with that statewide link.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Again, apologies about that.
Hey, Joe, if I could jump in, Leia. In the email I sent, I'm pretty sure I sent it to you, Joe. The link to the impaired waters list webpage does have it at the bottom. So it under the join us for a meeting, and then obviously Hannah can also send it to you too, but it should be in that email for this meeting as well.
Yeah, thanks. I see it now. Thanks, Brittany.
Okay, awesome.
All right, what else? There's got to be some more burning questions out there. Yes, Carly. Do you still?
Sorry, if there aren't other questions yet, I'll jump in. So for the PFOS and fish tissue, you said that's a statewide assessment. So does that mean that water bodies across the state were tested, and this is one of the pool 2 was one of the water bodies listed for the impairment?
Yeah, so let me see if I understand your question correctly. So I believe the PFAS in pool 2 was first listed in the 2022 list, and I can double check that here for you. And the PFAS in fish tissue is that statewide assessment. So we're doing that every 2 years. And then the site-specific ones will be in 2026 for the water column. Did that?
Okay, so are you able to verify if the water quality impairment for the water column PFOS impairment is from 2022?
Let me pull that up here. I have my spreadsheet open. Yeah.
Hi, Leia, can you hear me all right? Hi, this is Miranda Nichols from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. As long as you're digging it up, I thought I'd answer that question. It actually, the PFAS on pool 2 dates back from 2008. It's one of our first PFAS listings. And I believe, as I have it as well. So it kind of changed iterations. It was originally listed under a different AUID, but it does date back to 2008. Okay, if that answers your question. Yeah, so it is on the impaired waters list, but you'll have to see it year added to list way back in 2008.
Okay, not as pool 2 under a different AUID.
Correct. It's under Mississippi River. And the water body description is Upper St. Anthony Falls to St. Croix River. And the AUID, I don't want to rattle it off. I'd put it in the chat, but we could easily follow up with you. Yeah, so it changed, that AUID number changed, but the original listing dates back to 2008. And I think just to make sure that I understand your question, I think you're also asking, like, yes, we will, if we have PFAS data, yes, we would assess that area again in pool 2. And it's possible, yeah, so Leia knows all about this, right? We'll be covering this in the statewide meeting, and you might have some follow-up questions after that. It sounds like you're interested. In addition to that, I'm sure Leia and I could probably just confirm with the data analyst who did the assessment. I do believe that she looked at data for pool 2, what we're calling pool 2 right now. She looked at data again, and it was still not meeting standards. So it's still on the list. The data were revisited because we had it again. To Leia's credit, we are talking about fish tissue data here. So recent fish tissue data still does indicate impairment.
Okay, but was the water column data reviewed this year, or it won't be? were current impairments for the water column reviewed this year, or just the fish tissue for PFAS?
It was the fish tissue right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks, Miranda. Next up, I saw Greg Wilson.
Hi, good afternoon. I have a question that pertains to Bassett Creek watershed in the metro area. We've got a couple of water bodies where we're expecting to see listings in the impaired waters list and didn't see it. So I'm wondering if there's an easy way for us to find out how they were assessed, including what kind of data was included in the assessment. And if that, then depending on what that shows, we'd want to know if we need to comment one way or the other, either about the data that was used or why they weren't listed.
Sure, yeah. I'll give you a two-part answer to that. One being that in our assessment guidance manual, we do have listed out like all of our data minimums and kind of our methods of how we're doing assessments. So you can answer a piece of your question, hopefully by searching through that PDF and finding out those pieces. And then secondly, if you have some specific water bodies in mind, you can go ahead and shoot me an email and I can look that up and help you find out like what data it is that we were looking at for that.
Okay, and you want me to email that to you directly or to this email on the screen now?
Either one. If you have my current email of Leya Charles, that works too. But
okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. And then next up, I saw Renee Kieser.
Anin Boujou. Hi, Leya. This is Renee Kieser, the pesticide coordinator for White Earth. I was wondering if there is specific parameters for the comment, like are we limited to what the MPCA is accepting comment on in regards to the impaired water list? Or is there any type of guidance for submitting comment? Thank you.
Yeah, good question. So the three pieces that you can comment on are the list itself, that extensive spreadsheet, right? As well as the statewide mercury TMDL, which is a tab in that spreadsheet. So you can comment on either of those. And then also comment on the assessment guidance manual, which, as I mentioned, contains that Appendix H. So that's a piece of what you can comment on as well. And we are looking for any comments on those three that are in regards to, do you expect to see something on the list, that you haven't seen on the list? Is there something that maybe you have new data on that you expect to see come off the list? Do you have any comments about those water bodies used for production of wild rice? To comment on those as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Renee. All right. Anyone who's shy out there and thought they didn't get their question answered has opportunity. Go ahead. Yeah, Renee.
Okay, one more question in regard to the comments. I know we can comment on like the parameters and the list and if anything was omitted or anything like that, but what about is this an opportunity to submit comment on the levels, on the standards? Is this a time to submit comment on that as well?
No, not necessarily. This is specifically about the assessments for the impaired waters list. So this isn't, opening up any any new standards. I mean, you're certainly welcome to submit those comments in conjunction with how you think the assessment should differ. That definitely applies.
Thank you.
Yeah. Benjamin Maas.
Hello. I was just wondering if the recent news with the EPA and nitrate concentrations and the large number of streams that are impaired due to nutrients, what are some plans to get more streams delisted for the next assessment in 2 years from now?
Yeah, so this is all surface water bodies for nitrate. I think a lot of what has been in the news has been regarding groundwater, right? And
yes.
Those are, yeah. And so we have the nitrate for anything considered a drinking water use is one of our statewide assessments. So we're going to be talking a lot more about that in our statewide assessment meetings. I don't have any folks here on the line today that can really speak in depth to that, but they will be on those statewide meetings. So I would definitely encourage, if you have time, to pop into one of those. Otherwise, yeah, shoot me a message and I can get you connected with those folks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, any last lingering questions? Yes, I see you on the screen as H. Stelton.
Yeah, I hope my microphone is working here. I was wondering if someone could elaborate a bit on how TMDLs, excuse me, once they've been developed, are essentially used or referred to in order to actually enact change in impairments. You know, because it seems like it's almost like you mentioned this pollution budget, but what happens after those are developed that actually turns the needle on the pollution?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I can speak a little generally to that, but Brittany or Amy, do you want to pop in and help share a little more as a project manager perspective on what you guys do to help, you know, kind of fuel some of that restoration?
Yeah, sure. This is Amy Tim. Hey, Henry. Yeah, so, you know, the main idea is that we write the TMDLs so we can see where the nutrient loading is from, and then develop strategies to reduce those nutrient loadings. So going by those, you know, different strategies, then that helps to reduce the loading to the streams and lakes. But we also apply it to MS4s and some of the permits depending on the pollutant.
Okay, so in some cases, does it result in permits not being issued, or is it, you know, result in more stringent limitations on those permits being in place?
Yeah, so it could result in more stringent allocations to certain people based on what the estimated loading from that area is.
Okay, and are there cases where permits can be modified, like existing permits? So let's say there's, you know, a permit for some particular pollutants, and there's a number of existing permits and perhaps not any new ones, and yet it's still exceeding the TMDL. Are there instances where those permits are modified, or does it wait until like some sort of renewal period or process to see change?
Yeah, this would be more of a question for some of our MS4 permittee people and stuff. And so I can, you know, put you in touch with some of those folks if there's a certain permittee you're looking for or a certain area that you're hoping to get that information from. So we can talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, yeah, I may just shoot you a follow-up email or something.
Okay, that sounds real good, Henry. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I'm not seeing any more folks raised hands. So last call for questions. Otherwise, we can go ahead and wrap up. And yeah, if you think of anything later, definitely just send me a message and I can help get you connected with the folks who can answer it.
Yep. Just want to let everyone know on the back end that we will be stopping the recording now, ending today's meeting. But again, just encourage you to check out the MPCA's events calendar. We have all the other upcoming Impaired Waters public meetings on there if you would like to attend one of those. We have statewide topics as well as other regions that we will be discussing. And please do send an email to the one listed on the screen if you have any questions that come up afterwards. But yeah, thank you everyone for attending. Thanks, Leah. And we will conclude the meeting now. Thank you.